She had always been the pillar, the one who gave, supported, and kept everything together. But when the person she had loved and nurtured mocked her in front of the family, something inside her snapped. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. By morning, everything that bound them, their shared history, the trust, the promises, would be undone. No longer willing to be defined by the roles others expected her to play, she stepped into her own power. And when the dust settled, it was clear. She wasn't just someone they had known. She was the one who had quietly built everything, and now she was reclaiming it all. Before we begin, may I ask, where in this big, beautiful world are you listening from? It's always a quiet honor to know who's sharing this space. Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The chapel smelled like old cedar and candle wax, the kind of air that carried history in it. A soft October wind whispered against the stained glass windows as golden light slanted through them like something sacred had settled on the pews. Elaine stood alone near the altar, her hands folded neatly in front of her. The note she'd written trembled slightly in her grip, not from nerves, but restraint. Her lipstick was the same deep red she used for court hearings, not the dusty rose she wore when she still believed in fairy tales. She had arrived 15 minutes early, not to be polite, to make a point. Pastor Glenn emerged from the sacristy, adjusting his collar. His eyes softened when he saw her. "Elaine," he said kindly. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "For you," she said, handing him the folded note. "I'd appreciate if you read it privately before the ceremony tomorrow." He took it with both hands, sensing the weight of it. "I will." The chapel doors creaked open behind them. Laughter rolled in before the people did. Alyssa breezed through first in a white trench coat, trailing the scent of expensive perfume and entitlement. Her voice cut through the hush of the sanctuary. "Oh, look," she said to her bridesmaid, loud enough to carry. "She never knows when to stay home." Colin followed a beat behind her, adjusting his cufflinks with studied indifference. He heard Alyssa. Everyone did. He didn't flinch, didn't glance toward the altar. He just let out a short chuckle, dry, empty, far too familiar. Elaine's spine didn't move, but something in her eyes flickered. Pastor Glenn's jaw tensed. From the third pew, Colette, Alyssa's future sister-in-law and the one bridesmaid with a conscience, lowered her phone and slowly turned her head. Madison caught the moment like radar. Elaine's eldest granddaughter, all freckles and fierce loyalty, narrowed her eyes toward the bridal party. "Want me to say something?" she asked under her breath, sliding her phone into her pocket like it could become a weapon. Elaine gave a soft shake of her head. "No, sweetheart, not yet." Colin and Alyssa took their places near the pulpit, her train imaginary, but her arrogance heavy enough to trip over. The rehearsal started with awkward pacing and half-hearted smiles. Pastor Glenn walked them through the motions with the calm of a man trying to herd cats, while knowing a lion might pounce at any moment. Elaine sat quietly in the front pew, a silent witness to the farce playing out under vaulted beams and false promises. Her eyes never left her son, though his never found hers. At one point, Alyssa pretended to stumble as Colin helped her up the steps to the altar. She giggled and leaned into him. "Good thing my real dress has better balance," she quipped to the room. Laughter followed, from bridesmaids, groomsmen, even Colin, but not Colette, not Pastor Glenn, not Elaine. Elaine closed her eyes just long enough to breathe. When she opened them, Colette was looking at her, not pity, recognition. Something unspoken passed between them, a truth hiding in plain sight. Rehearsal ended 20 minutes later. Hugs were exchanged like currency, and Pastor Glenn folded Elaine's letter into his Bible without comment. As people milled around, Alyssa posed for selfies near the altar, dragging Colin into a few. Madison reappeared at Elaine's side, chewing the inside of her cheek. "So what's tomorrow supposed to be, Grandma? A wedding or a warning?" Elaine stood, smoothing the fabric of her charcoal blazer. "That depends entirely," she said, her voice low and steady, "on what he does when the pastor reads that letter." Madison blinked. "You put it all in there?" Elaine looked toward her son, the man who used to cry when he scraped his knee and now laughed when his mother was insulted in public. "Not all," she whispered, "just enough to make him sweat." And as the doors creaked open again to let the guests leave, a shadow entered instead. A woman, mid-30s, in dark jeans and a leather jacket, stood in the back aisle, watching Elaine with a gaze that didn't belong to a stranger. Elaine's breath caught. Madison's hand tightened on hers. "Who is that?" Elaine didn't answer. Because she already knew. Elaine always believed the truest power moved quietly. It was just past 8 a.m. when she slid her key into the office door of Harrison Wells, CPA, nestled inside a nondescript brick building across from the county courthouse. No plaques, no flashy signage, just discretion, hardwood floors, and a man who had known her since Colin was 6. He looked up from his computer as she entered, adjusting his reading glasses. "You're early." "So are you." He motioned to the leather chair across from his desk. "Coffee's fresh. Still take it black." Elaine nodded, setting her gloves beside the ceramic mug he'd already poured for her. Harrison opened a folder on his desk, the kind with dividers and real paper, not emails and guesswork. "They never asked who was paying. Not really," he said, flipping through invoices. "They just assumed it was Colin's card behind that catering bill. Alyssa's parents thought it was her trust. Meanwhile," Elaine slid a finger across the manila tab labeled Private Family Ledger, Restricted. "They never once asked for a statement," she said, voice cool. "Not even when the florist required a second deposit." "Your name's on every invoice," Harrison confirmed. "Dresses, venue, catering, even the honeymoon flights. They're all under your payment authorization. It's cleaner than I expected." Elaine let out a soft exhale. That's what happens when people stop reading the fine print. Harrison raised an eyebrow. They didn't read the room either. That made her smile. Not wide, but real. He swiveled his monitor toward her. "You want to pull the trigger now, or wait?" "Now, before the spa appointments start." With a nod, Harrison began typing. Line by line, he accessed every pending vendor account. Floral design, ceremony musicians, catering, transport, hotel blocks, the honeymoon reservation through Miles & Miles Travel Co., and revoked every single payment authorization. Legally, swiftly, with cold precision. "Done," he said. The silence that followed wasn't quiet. It hummed. "Who's going to be first to find out?" Elaine asked. As if on cue, Harrison's phone lit up. He turned it so she could see the caller ID. Colette. He answered with one of his standard phrases. "Wells Accounting. You've reached Harrison." Elaine couldn't hear the other end, but she didn't need to. Colette's voice carried panic even when muted. Harrison listened, expression unreadable. "No, the payments didn't bounce. They were withdrawn." "Yes, by the account holder." "No, I can't authorize a reversal without written instruction." Pause. "The holder?" "That would be Mrs. Elaine Carter." He hung up and looked at Elaine. "That's the first domino." Elaine stood, gathering her gloves. "And it'll only fall louder from here." Colette's phone was still pressed to her ear when she stumbled into the bridal suite at the resort. Alyssa was mid-manicure, sipping cucumber water while 2 bridesmaids posed for selfies in the background. "You okay?" Alyssa asked, annoyed by the interruption. Colette ignored her and zeroed in on Colin, who was thumbing through a list of rehearsal dinner RSVPs. "Do you have any idea who paid for this wedding?" Colin scoffed. "Me, obviously." "No," she said. "Not even close." He looked up, face blank. Colette turned to Alyssa. "You didn't wonder why nobody ever asked you to transfer funds? Or why the deposits were always already handled?" Alyssa blinked, mascara wand in midair. Colette held up her phone. "Elaine Carter's name is on every single vendor account. And as of this morning, every payment is frozen." "What do you mean frozen?" Alyssa snapped, voice going high. "I mean, unless someone comes up with about 70 grand today, there's no wedding." Colin dropped his phone. "Literally." Alyssa stared at Colette like she'd been slapped. "She can't do that. She wouldn't dare." Colette didn't answer, because deep down, they both knew Elaine would. Back at the chapel, Pastor Glenn was already seated in his office, Elaine's letter open in his hands. He was halfway through the second page when his expression changed. From pastoral calm to something far closer to alarm. The boutique's bell chimed like a warning. Alyssa stormed through the glass doors of Lillian Lace Bridal, her heels clapping against marble tile, leaving her bridesmaids scrambling behind her. She didn't pause to greet the receptionist or admire the curated floral displays. She had one target: the ivory mermaid gown hanging behind tempered glass, like a relic in a museum. "That's my dress," she snapped, stabbing a manicured finger at it. The clerk behind the counter looked up from her screen. "Name on the account?" "Alyssa Rowan." "I've had 3 fittings. I'm picking it up today," the woman typed, paused, frowned. "I'm sorry, Ms. Rowan. That account's been flagged. The gown's currently on hold." Alyssa's brows shot up. "Excuse me." The clerk cleared her throat. "There's an unpaid balance, significant. Our system won't release the item until it's settled in full." Alyssa's laugh had too many teeth. "You must be new. The dress was covered weeks ago. My fiancé's mother paid the deposit." "Yes, the down payment was made by Elaine Carter," the clerk confirmed. "But the final balance was scheduled for this morning." "That payment was canceled at 8:19 a.m. A silence cracked open in the boutique like glass under pressure. Alyssa took 2 slow steps forward. "Do you have any idea who I am?" The clerk blinked. "Yes, and I also know bridal accounts are legal contracts. Until that dress is paid for in full, it doesn't belong to you." Alyssa's mouth opened, then shut. Color rushed to her face, not pink, but a deep blotchy red. She turned sharply, snatching her phone out of her handbag. "Colin, the dress is being held hostage," she hissed the moment he picked up. "Your mom pulled the final payment. Again, fix it." On the other end of the line, Colin rubbed his forehead like it might summon clarity. He was seated on the patio of the hotel, staring at a growing list of unpaid charges piling into his inbox like incoming missiles. "She paid the deposit?" he asked numbly. "Yes, and apparently that's it now," he sighed. "I'll call her." Elaine answered on the second ring. She was at her kitchen table, slicing apples with quiet precision while Madison did homework across from her. "Mom," Colin's voice was clipped, "is this about yesterday?" Elaine wiped the blade clean and set it down gently. "No," she said. "It's about every day before that." There was a beat of silence. "I'm not sure what that means." "Of course you're not. Alyssa's upset. She says you're trying to sabotage the wedding." Elaine almost laughed, but it caught somewhere in her chest. "If I wanted to sabotage it, there wouldn't have been a dress to begin with." Colin's voice turned defensive. "You're making this about you." Elaine tilted her head, eyes narrowing just slightly. "No, Colin. I'm making it about reality, something you've avoided since the moment she put a ring on." "I don't deserve this." "No," she agreed quietly. "You deserve the truth, but that would cost more than you're willing to pay." She ended the call. Across the table, Madison watched her grandmother with narrowed eyes. "Was that him?" Elaine nodded. Madison twisted her pencil between her fingers. "He sounds confused, but not sorry." Elaine's smile was thin. "That's been the pattern, hasn't it?" The doorbell rang before Madison could answer. Elaine rose, wiping her hands on a towel. She opened the front door to find Colette standing there, alone, flushed, and holding something wrapped in garment plastic. Elaine blinked. "Did you drive all the way here?" Colette nodded once. Her hands trembled slightly as she held out the package. "She told the boutique to throw it in storage. Said she'd get something less cursed. I thought maybe you'd want to see what she gave up." Elaine hesitated, then gently peeled the zipper down. Inside hung the gown, but it wasn't the one Alyssa had chosen. It was the one Elaine had picked for her, back when they were still pretending to care what she thought. She ran a hand over the fabric, breath catching. "You recognize it?" Colette asked. Elaine nodded. "I designed it." Colette hadn't meant to become the messenger, but someone had to explain the math. She sat on the edge of the hotel suite's velvet couch, knees drawn tight together, her voice level as she read aloud from the vendor summary she'd printed out from her email. All contracts, venue, catering, florist, transportation, were negotiated under a single umbrella. Carter Family Fund, Private Ledger 04B. That umbrella is closed. Colin stared at her like she'd spoken in code. "Wait. So every vendor was relying on my mom?" "Yes," Colette replied. "They agreed to the reduced deposits because Elaine was the financial anchor. Without her, everything collapses." Alyssa paced in front of the window, arms folded across her chest like she was holding herself together with sheer tension. "What about the florist?" she barked. The flowers were confirmed weeks ago. Colette scanned the email again. Delivery was scheduled for Friday, 24 hours before the wedding. No payment, no delivery. As of this morning, the order was canceled. Alyssa whipped around, face flushed. She's sabotaging us. Colin stayed quiet. Not because he disagreed, but because deep down, he'd started to suspect she wasn't sabotaging anything. She was revealing it. Across town, Valerie Rowan's voice came through the phone like steam through a cracked teapot. "You poked the bear, Alyssa. And the bear has a checkbook." "I didn't poke anything, Mom. She hates me. She's hated me since day one." Valerie sighed, exasperated. "No, she didn't. She tolerated you. That's much worse." Alyssa's mouth opened in outrage. Valerie kept going. "I told you not to provoke a woman who signs checks with fountain pens, sweetheart. There's a reason that kind of woman survives 3 recessions and 2 husbands." "She's blowing everything up," Alyssa shrieked. "No, she's pulling back what was never yours to begin with." There was a pause on the line. Valerie's tone shifted. "Tell me honestly, what did you do?" Alyssa didn't answer, because the answer was nothing and everything. Elaine ignored the first 5 calls, then turned her phone off. She sat on her back porch, mug of black coffee cooling beside her, watching October leaves skitter across the lawn like they were late for something. The sky was overcast, but not dramatic, just honest. Madison came out with a fleece blanket and draped it over her shoulders. "You're getting voicemails in batches," she said. "Colin, Alyssa." One from a woman who sounded like her lawyer. Elaine didn't flinch. "Let them stew. They're panicking." "They should be." Madison sat down beside her, their silence companionable. After a while, Elaine murmured, "Do you know why I never changed my last name when I got married?" Madison shook her head. "Because the name Carter came from people who taught me not to flinch when men got loud. Who taught me contracts matter more than intentions. That signatures aren't promises, they're leverage." Madison blinked slowly. "Are you telling me this as a warning?" "No," Elaine said softly. "As a reminder." Back at Harrison's office, the numbers were still shifting. He pulled up the venue reservation, a private estate an hour north, known for lakefront ceremonies and exclusive buyouts. Harrison had negotiated the deal himself, making sure Elaine's name was listed as primary guarantor. He clicked through to the account dashboard and saw the blinking cursor next to the status. Active, paid in full, but only for now. Elaine stood behind him, arms crossed, jaw set. "We can halt the venue too," Harrison said. "Your name holds the reservation. You don't even need a reason." Elaine didn't blink. "Do it." "You want me to cancel everything?" "No," she said. "Just make it available." Harrison looked up at her. "You're giving them a chance to fix it?" "I'm giving them a chance," she replied. "What they do with it is up to them." He nodded once, then began to type. At the resort, Colette's phone buzzed again, this time with a new notification. She read it twice before lifting her gaze toward Colin, who was halfway through composing a pleading text to his mother. "Well?" Alyssa snapped. Colette didn't answer right away. Then, "The venue just opened to the public." "What?" "The Carter reservation is gone. Anyone can book it now." Colin dropped his phone again. Alyssa's hand flew to her mouth. Colette took a step back. "You might want to check with your wedding planner, because unless someone pays the full balance today, there may be another bride walking down that aisle." By the time the first guests arrived, the wedding already smelled wrong. The parking lot was only half full. The music, if it could be called that, was being piped in from someone's backup Bluetooth speaker. The string quartet had pulled out that morning, citing contractual complications. No one bothered to lower the volume when their recorded replacements hiccuped between tracks. Inside, the floral arrangements were scattered and small. A few dusty roses leaned against one another in thin glass cylinders, their stems browning from yesterday's failed delivery. A single flower wall, intended to span the length of the altar, stood off-center, half bare. The champagne station had a bucket of melting ice and no bottles. Guests milled awkwardly, whispering, confused. No wedding planner in sight. No bridal party offering direction. No wine. Just a pale young usher in an ill-fitting suit muttering, "Please take a seat," as if the world might tip if anyone stood too long. At the very front, second row left, sat a single white chair with a lavender ribbon on its back. It had been reserved for Elaine Carter. It stayed empty. 30 miles away, Elaine sat on her porch in her softest robe, the one with sleeves she liked to push up when reading. A ceramic mug steamed between her hands. Her paperback, The Art of War, annotated, was open on her lap, spine well worn. From inside, the faint crackle of a classical station played Debussy's Clair de Lune, rich and clean. She was exactly where she wanted to be. Madison stepped outside holding a plate of warm scones, still flaking steam. Their lemon poppy seed. The good kind, not the store kind. Elaine took one and broke it in half. "You spoil me," Madison smirked. "Figured today was a good day to celebrate." "Celebrate what?" Madison sat beside her. "The best wedding I've never been to." Elaine bit into the scone. "Then let's toast to absence." At the venue, the bridal suite was filled with static. Alyssa stood in front of the vanity mirror in full makeup, full hair, and half a meltdown. Her dress hung wrong. The boning bit into her ribs. The bustle wouldn't sit right. Her lipstick had bled into the corner of her mouth and dried like a warning. "I can't walk out like this," she hissed. Colin, standing 3 feet behind her and looking like he hadn't slept, didn't answer right away. "We're already behind," he offered, voice flat. "No one told the band to play the processional. Where's the coordinator? Where are the damn ushers?" Colin looked at her through the mirror. "We couldn't afford the coordinator, remember?" Alyssa turned on him like a switchblade. "This is your mother's fault." Colin didn't flinch. "You made her the enemy. I just stood back and let her become one." Alyssa's breath caught like a sob, but no tears came. "Why aren't you fixing this?" she asked, voice hollow. Colin looked at her dress, her makeup, the chaos outside the door. "I'm not sure I can." Downstairs, Pastor Glenn stood at the altar with the gravity of a judge at sentencing. His robe was pressed, his hands were folded. His expression was unreadable. The guests had gone quiet, all watching the front. There was no music. The air buzzed with waiting. Colette took her seat in the 3rd row, alone, her face still and unsmiling. When the doors finally opened and Alyssa appeared on the arm of no one, her father having declined to come, there was a stutter of polite applause. She walked the aisle like it owed her something. Colin stood at the altar, hands clasped, jaw tight. As they met, Pastor Glenn gave a shallow nod. "Dearly beloved," he began, with the tone of a man fulfilling obligation, not joy. "We are gathered here, however imperfectly, for the joining of these two." From the back row, a phone vibrated against a wooden pew, then another, then another. One by one, heads turned downward. Phones lifted. Colette's buzzed next. She glanced at the screen and froze. The local wedding blog's post had just gone live. Exclusive. High-profile Lakeview wedding collapses under canceled contracts. Bride's future mother-in-law pulls funding days before ceremony. Attached was a photo of Elaine on her porch, coffee in hand. Smiling, the morning after the wedding that wasn't. The world had already moved on. Except for the people who couldn't. News outlets stopped calling by noon. The venue reopened its calendar. The florist repackaged their withered stock into clearance bouquets. But in a modest law office downtown, a new kind of ceremony was unfolding. Harrison sat behind his desk, tie loosened, pen poised over a neat stack of documents embossed with gold lettering. His glasses reflected the soft glow of the desk lamp as Elaine reviewed each page, line by line. No emotion. Just clarity. "So it's official?" she asked. He nodded. "The Mercer Family Education Trust is now fully registered and funded. Initial deposit covers projected tuition and living expenses for 3 generations, assuming standard inflation rates." He tapped the folder once. "It's airtight." Elaine rested her hand on the top sheet. "Mercer," she murmured. "My grandmother's maiden name." "Good choice," Harrison said. "Clean, untied. No one can trace it unless you want them to." She smiled faintly. "I don't." He slid another paper across the table. "Sign here. This names Madison Carter as the first beneficiary and co-executor." Elaine signed slowly, deliberately, her penmanship elegant, unwavering. Then she pulled a cream-colored envelope from her bag, sealed and addressed in looping script, for Madison. "She gets this when I'm gone," Elaine said. Harrison hesitated. "You want me to read it?" "No?" She looked out the window where the autumn sunlight hit the glass like gold. It's not for understanding, it's for remembering. He nodded and placed the envelope inside the safe marked private holdings. Later that afternoon, Madison found her grandmother in the kitchen, humming under her breath while wiping down the counter. "Busy day?" Madison asked. Elaine smiled without turning. "A productive one." Madison set down her backpack. "Grandma, is it true you started some kind of trust thing? Mr. Wells called the house to confirm something." Elaine turned then, her eyes soft but sharp. "Yes, it's a scholarship fund. For the ones who watched and stayed kind." Madison tilted her head. "What does that mean?" Elaine reached into the drawer beside her and handed over a carbon copy of the trust document. "It means not every inheritance is meant to reward bloodlines." Madison studied it, her name printed neatly at the top. "I don't know what to say." "Then don't. Just use it someday for something good." Elaine brushed a stray hair from her granddaughter's forehead. "You've already earned it." Madison smiled, but her eyes glistened. "You know, Mom would have—" Elaine raised a hand gently. "Let's not bring ghosts to the table, sweetheart." 3 days later, Colin showed up on her porch uninvited. The same porch where she'd smiled for the photo that went viral. The same porch that had become her quiet kingdom. He didn't knock. He just stood at the railing, hands buried in his pockets. Face pale from too much shame and too little sleep. "You made a trust," he said. Elaine didn't look up from her book. "I did. For Madison." "Yes." He exhaled sharply. "You didn't think I deserved to know." Finally, she closed the book and laid it across her lap. "Deserve," she repeated softly, tasting the word. "You might want to retire that one. I'm still your son." "You're also a man who laughed," she said evenly. He blinked. "What?" "At the chapel," she continued, her voice steady. "When Alyssa said I didn't know when to stay home. You laughed. You didn't defend me. You didn't even look at me." Colin's jaw tightened. It was a joke. Elaine's gaze didn't waver. "So is legacy, when handed to the wrong hands." He opened his mouth, then shut it again. There was nothing to say that wouldn't sound smaller than the truth. She stood, smoothed her sweater, and placed her empty mug on the table. "Madison comes from the same line you do," she said quietly. "But she still remembers her manners." Colin swallowed. "So that's it. You're cutting me out." Elaine gave him a long, steady look. "No," she said finally. "I'm just stopping the leak." When he left, the wind picked up, the first sign of winter creeping in. Elaine watched from the doorway as leaves spun down the driveway in slow, deliberate circles, like the world agreeing with her decision. Inside, on her desk, sat a new folder, this one labeled Phase 2. Harrison's handwriting across the top read, "Assets, to be redistributed, pending." Elaine reached for her pen. The photo was simple, an overhead shot of a porcelain coffee mug, a linen notebook, and a pair of tortoiseshell reading glasses set on a windowsill. Beyond the glass, a sweep of golden leaves blurred in soft focus. The caption read, "Some women build weddings, others build people. I watched one woman try to do both, until she was told she didn't belong. Now I watch her build again, from silence, not spectacle." Legacy isn't loud. It's what stays standing after the noise is gone. Colette Harper. She didn't tag anyone. She didn't have to. By noon, the post had been shared over 4,000 times. It started with messages, quiet ones, friends of the family, church acquaintances, neighbors who had once politely nodded to Alyssa and now wrote things like, "I always thought Elaine was the backbone. Was this what really happened? Do you need help sorting out donations for the venue? We'd rather support her than the circus." Colin's co-workers saw it next. One of them forwarded the post to the department thread. Another circled the word legacy and simply replied, "Guess we know which side she's on." By the end of the day, Colin had stopped checking his phone. Every buzz felt like an accusation. Alyssa didn't notice until her stylist canceled, saying she wasn't comfortable participating in any rescheduling conversations. Then the DJ backed out. Then the woman who'd offered to lend her backyard for a makeup reception quietly ghosted. Alyssa marched through the house like a woman on fire. "She humiliated us on purpose," she shouted, pacing. "This is calculated, sociopathic. Who writes a trust and makes it go viral?" She didn't post anything, Colin muttered. Oh, please. You think she doesn't pull the strings? That post from your sister is a PR grenade. She spun to face him. We're going to redo the reception, somewhere big, somewhere better. And we're inviting everyone again. This time, we control the story. Colin rubbed his temples. With what money? Alyssa hesitated, but only briefly. Can't we access what was meant for the original vendors? He laughed. A short, humorless bark. There is no vendor fund anymore. She liquidated it. She folded her arms. Then your accountant can release something. Talk to Harrison. Colin did. Harrison didn't even pretend to be polite. They're welcome to pay for it, he said, clicking through documents with surgical calm. Independently. But that's my mother's fund, Colin started. No, that was her private fund, structured with full discretion and now permanently diverted. To where? Harrison pushed his glasses up. Scholarships, women's trades programs. And as of this morning, the first new grant. A partnership with Fleur & Finch Floral Studio. What? Colin blinked. She gave the florist $10,000 to launch an apprentice program for inner-city youth interested in sustainable design. The paperwork was finalized an hour ago. Colin just stood there, hands flat on the desk, not sure whether to scream or sit. Meanwhile, Elaine walked the greenhouse rows with Margot Finch, the head floral designer who'd once had to call her in tears when Alyssa canceled the bouquet order mid-fit. The greenhouse smelled of wet soil and lavender. Autumn sunlight filtered through the panes, hitting rows of peonies and ranunculus just starting to bud again after being neglected. She didn't just damage the contract, Margot was saying. She demoralized the team. One of our interns cried in the supply room for an hour after Alyssa accused her of mismanaging roses. Elaine nodded slowly. Then let's make sure the next generation never takes orders like that again. She handed over a manila envelope. Margot opened it. Her hand flew to her chest. This is startup capital for your apprentices. Pay the youngest ones first, especially the ones who stay late to clean. Margot blinked hard. Elaine, I don't know what to say. Then don't. Elaine's smile was soft. Just grow something that blooms better than they did. That evening, Colette sat on her back deck, scrolling through the latest comments on her post. Some supportive, some stunned, some from former friends asking, quietly, what really happened behind the scenes. She didn't answer any of them. Instead, she clicked over to a private group chat she hadn't used in months, Carter Women, past plus present, and typed, anyone want to help me organize something for Madison? Not a fundraiser, something better. 3 dots appeared immediately, then a reply. How about a mentorship circle? No filters, just real women showing up. Aunt Jean. Another, I'm in. We all watched Elaine fight this quietly. I think it's time we made noise for her. Karen D., cousin Colette grinned. And hit send. At the edge of town, Elaine stepped into her bedroom and flicked off the light. She didn't check the internet. She didn't need to. Because the world was already shifting in the way she always trusted it would. Not because she shouted, but because she withdrew. Not in anger, but in truth. She sat down at her desk, opened phase 2, and crossed off 2 lines. Underneath was a fresh one she hadn't yet touched. The property. She clicked her pen. The first call came on a Wednesday morning. Elaine's phone buzzed once, twice, then rolled into voicemail. The caller ID read Valerie Rowan. She didn't pick up. From her seat by the window, she could see frost tracing faint silver veins along the porch railing. The air had that early winter crispness that made sound travel farther. Every bird call felt like a sentence in the cold. The phone buzzed again. This time Madison leaned over, checking the screen. Want me to mute it? Elaine didn't look up from her crossword. No, let her talk to the machine. It's the only conversation I owe her. The line clicked. Valerie's voice filled the room, smooth but cracking at the edges. Elaine, I just wanted to say, I think things went too far. I know Alyssa can be impulsive, but she's hurting. Colin's lost, and you've made your point. Maybe it's time to stop proving it. A pause. Please call me back, before this gets uglier. The message ended. The room went still. Madison's gaze stayed on her grandmother. You're not going to call her, are you? Elaine set her pencil down, gaze fixed on the last unfinished word. Resolve. No, she said. I'm not giving her a stage to perform regret. The next morning, Valerie tried again. This time she called the house phone. Madison answered. Elaine Carter's residence. Madison, hi, it's Valerie. Is your grandmother there? She's here. Well, could you tell her I'd just like 5 minutes? She doesn't want your voice in her head, Madison said calmly. Silence. Then a thin exhale on the other end. You're starting to sound like her. Madison's lips twitched. That's the goal. She hung up before Valerie could reply. By week's end, Elaine had slipped back into her rhythm. She returned to her Thursday book club at Greendale Library, where women her age traded dog-eared paperbacks and unfiltered opinions about both literature and life. When she walked in, conversation quieted, not from gossip, but reverence. Elaine smiled, setting her worn copy of The House of Mirth on the table. I brought the pastries this week, she said, and I promise no one's funding scandal attached to them. Laughter broke the tension. They read, they debated, they refilled coffee cups. Elaine found herself laughing more easily than she had in months. When discussion ended, the group chairwoman lingered behind. Elaine, before you go, our local literacy nonprofit is looking for new board members. We help fund adult education and re-entry programs. You'd be perfect for it. Elaine tilted her head, considering. That sounds exactly like what I should be doing next. By the time she got home, she'd already emailed her acceptance. 2 days later, a delivery van pulled into her driveway. The driver carried a white box the size of a toddler and a small handwritten card taped on top. Elaine didn't touch it. She called out, Madison, could you see what that is? Madison tore the tape gently. Inside sat an explosion of pale roses and eucalyptus, arranged in the kind of sterile perfection that smelled more like money than emotion. The card read, Let's talk? Colin Madison didn't hesitate. She carried the bouquet straight to the backyard, lifted the lid on the compost bin, and dumped them in. When she came back in, she wiped her hands on a dish towel. Done. Elaine arched an eyebrow. That was quick. Madison shrugged. The ground knows what to do with decay. Elaine smiled, slowly, deeply. That it does. That evening, the sky turned violet, and snow began to drift in slow, deliberate flakes. Elaine watched it from her porch, wrapped in a wool shawl. The world was quieter now, so quiet she could almost hear the house breathing, old wood settling, pipes murmuring warmth through its bones. She thought of Valerie's message, of Alyssa's noise, of Colin's flowers turning to mulch behind the shed. Every storm, she realized, carries its own cleanup crew. She'd simply learned to stop being one of them. From inside, Madison called out, Grandma, they posted about you again. The nonprofit's website. There's a photo. Elaine didn't move. A decent one, I hope. Yeah, Madison said, stepping outside with her phone. You're smiling, and the caption says, Elaine Carter joins as board treasurer, bringing decades of quiet integrity and community trust. Elaine looked at the screen. Her smile there wasn't posed. It was the kind that comes from oxygen finally reaching every corner of the lungs. Quiet integrity, she repeated. That'll do. Madison tucked the phone away and leaned against the railing beside her. Do you think he'll ever get it? She asked softly. Elaine considered that for a long moment. Then, some lessons don't bloom until they're watered with distance. The snow kept falling. Inside, the answering machine blinked once. New message. Harrison's voice this time, low and steady. Elaine, it's ready. The property transfer went through. Call me when you want to sign. Elaine's lips curved, barely. She rose from her chair, brushed a dusting of snow from her sleeves, and whispered to herself, Phase 2, complete. The signing was scheduled for 10 in the morning. Though Elaine arrived early, as she always did when something mattered, Harrison's office was quiet, the kind of quiet that suggested insulation from the noise of the world outside. A single lamp burned on his desk, throwing a honeyed glow across the polished oak. He looked up when she entered and smiled faintly. Coffee. Always, she said, shrugging out of her coat. On the desk, a stack of embossed folders waited. The top one read, The Carter Estate Trust, in crisp serif lettering. Beneath it, in smaller print, Final Amendment. Harrison adjusted his glasses. Everything's prepared. When you sign these, the full structure takes effect. future estate assets, property holdings, accounts. Everything bypasses Colin entirely. Madison becomes primary beneficiary and co-executor of the education fund, the family home, and your foundation seat. Elaine took a moment to read. The pen felt heavier than usual in her hand, the kind of weight that came from closing a lifetime chapter without fanfare. She signed the first line, then the next, her signature looping steady and unshaken. When she reached the last page, Harrison said quietly, "He can contest it, but he won't win." She didn't look up. "I'm not afraid of challenge," she said, sliding the folder back toward him. "Just disrespect." He nodded, tapping his pen against the blotter. "I'll file this today. You've done something most people only threaten to do." Elaine smiled. Most people confuse forgiveness with weakness. That afternoon, she and Madison stopped at the downtown community center where a new exhibit had gone up in the main lobby, Women Who Build Foundations. The display was a collage of black and white portraits, teachers, nurses, social workers, donors, each photo framed by a small brass nameplate. Madison found her grandmother's image halfway down the wall, right between two long-retired school principals. In her picture, Elaine wasn't posing. Someone had caught her mid-laugh, head turned slightly, light glancing off her cheekbone. The caption read, "Elaine Carter, educator, advocate, benefactor. For believing quiet work still moves the world." Madison stared at it, hands stuffed into her coat pockets. "You look younger in this." Elaine studied the photo, then tilted her head. "Peace subtracts years, darling. Vanity can't do that." Madison grinned. "You think Mom would have liked this?" "I think she would have asked what took me so long." They stood there for a while, side by side, letting strangers pass. No one whispered anymore. No one pointed. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft, unassuming, persistent. By early evening, Harrison's phone rang again. Caller ID, Valerie Rowan. He considered ignoring it, but answered on the third ring, voice clipped. "Wells Accounting. Harrison, it's Valerie. I think we should talk about Elaine's estate. There must be some flexibility. Family discretion. You know how these things work." "I do," he said, "and that's precisely why I'm declining to discuss it." Her tone sweetened. "You've always been reasonable. Surely you see this entire rift has gone too far. If Elaine could just redirect a portion, say, housing equity or a trust clause." "Mrs. Rowan," he interrupted. "The documents are signed, filed, binding. If you have questions, you can contact the clerk's office." She laughed, soft and brittle. "Come on, Harrison. You and I both know a few well-placed revisions could make everyone whole again." He reached for the receiver cradle. "I think we're done here." "Wait." He hung up. Then he unplugged the phone. Back at home, Elaine was sitting at her desk when Madison knocked on the doorframe. "Dinner's ready." And someone from the Chronicle emailed. "They want to feature you in a philanthropy issue." Elaine looked up from the open folder marked Phase 3. "Tell them no. Quiet work stays quiet." Madison lingered. "You're not even curious what they'd say?" Elaine closed the folder and stood. "Curiosity's how they keep you watching the circus. I've seen enough tents for one lifetime." As they walked toward the kitchen, Madison reached out, linking her arm through her grandmother's. "So what's Phase 3? Elaine smiled faintly. "You'll see. It's about building something that lasts longer than applause." Madison frowned, half playful. "Grandma, that sounds ominous." "Not ominous," Elaine said. "Just overdue." The clock ticked softly behind them, marking time with the rhythm of finality. Outside, the wind shifted, scattering snow into the porch light's beam. Somewhere far away, a phone kept ringing into nothing, unanswered. It ended with a suitcase, not a scream. Alyssa stood by the entryway of the townhome they'd barely lived in, wearing tailored slacks and a wool coat she hadn't paid for. Her wedding ring was gone. Her voice was flat. "You checked out a long time ago," she said, adjusting the strap of her designer tote. "I'm just matching the energy." Colin leaned against the kitchen counter, arms folded across his chest. He hadn't shaved in 3 days. "Do you want me to fight you on this?" he asked. "No," she said, not even glancing back. "You don't have the spine." The front door shut with a soft final click. No slammed drawers, no overturned vases, just absence, clean and unmistakable. Colin called twice that night, once to Madison's phone. She let it go to voicemail, the second time to Elaine's landline. She picked up, let him speak into the silence, then hung up when he said her name like it still belonged to him. The next day, Elaine sat at Harrison's office once more, her coat draped over the armrest, hands steady. He slid the form across the desk. It's just a few signatures. Medical directive, updates to your healthcare proxy, power of attorney, end-of-life preferences. Elaine read each line, then paused at the section labeled Primary Agent. The old version had Colin's name. Her only child. Her only mistake that had lived long enough to repeat itself. She drew a line through it. Neatly, firmly, she wrote, Madison Carter. No hesitation, Harrison asked. None, she said. He nodded. Then I'll have it notarized today. When she stepped outside, the wind caught her hair, wild and bright. She didn't smooth it down. That evening, Madison found her in the study, holding a framed photo, Colin and Alyssa at the altar, all false gold and sharper smiles. It had survived the storm, until now. Elaine walked it calmly to the shredder and dropped it in without pause. The blades took their time. You didn't even flinch, Madison said from the doorway. Elaine looked up. The photograph forgot who I was long before I did. Madison watched the last corner disappear. Want tea? Elaine nodded. Something strong, not sweet. Later that week, Pastor Glenn knocked gently on her door. He held a small tin of shortbread and a Bible under one arm. Though he didn't offer either right away, Elaine welcomed him in. She didn't ask what brought him. They both knew. They sat in the front room, the same one where Colin had once opened Christmas gifts in footy pajamas. The silence between them was soft. I wanted to say something after the ceremony, he began, but it didn't feel like my moment. Elaine offered a faint smile. It wasn't anyone's moment, that was the problem. He leaned forward, elbows on knees. You did it with dignity. You didn't have to yell. Her eyes met his, steady. That was the point, Pastor Glenn exhaled. Most people don't understand that kind of silence is louder than rage. Elaine's voice barely rose above a whisper. I didn't need to scream. I only needed to outlast them. He placed the tin on the side table and stood. You did more than that. That night, after Madison had gone to bed and the house had settled into its warm creaks and hush, Elaine opened the drawer of her bedside table and removed an old photograph. Faded. Corners curling. Her, younger. Holding a toddler version of Colin. They were on a porch swing. She remembered the sound it made. Chains creaking, wood settling, her humming something soft and wordless. Back when he still reached for her hand instinctively. She looked at the image for a long time, then placed it face down in the drawer. Outside, snow tapped gently against the window, like fingers drumming from the past. She didn't open it. The air smelled like salt and wind and the faint ghost of magnolia leaves. The garden house on Tybee Island wasn't grand. It wasn't meant to be. Pale green shutters, faded rocking chairs, seagrass curling wild at the base of the steps. It had once been Elaine's weekend place, then a retreat. Now it was something quieter, a place to meet people who didn't know her only by the headlines. The girl was already there, early, just like Elaine had been taught to be. She stood beside the trellis where jasmine had bloomed last spring, her posture rigid with nerves, her hands clutched around a manila folder like it might run away. Elaine stepped from the gravel path in soft-soled shoes, carrying a small tote and a dog-eared copy of A Room of One's Own. No announcement, no speech, just presence. The student turned, startled. Miss Carter? Elaine smiled gently. You must be Talia. The girl nodded too fast. Yes. Sorry, I didn't expect this to be so human, Elaine offered. Talia laughed, half embarrassed, half relieved. Yes, and terrifying. But also, thank you for the grant. I didn't even know how to apply. My advisor told me someone nominated me. They did, Elaine said. I trust her taste. Talia opened the folder, revealing a single sheet, the letter confirming her full scholarship and stipend. It had no donor name, only the seal of the Mercer Trust. I thought it was a mistake, she said, like maybe they meant someone else. Elaine sat on the bench beneath the arbor. They didn't. Talia hesitated, then sat beside her. "Can I ask why?" Elaine ran her hand along the edge of the book in her lap, her thumb finding the worn crease. "Because someone once saw what they tried not to, and she changed everything for me." Her gaze moved toward the ocean, though it was just out of sight. "I've been repaying her, one name at a time." Talia was quiet for a beat. Then, "I didn't think people like you noticed people like me." Elaine turned to her, voice steady. "People like me are people like you. We just live long enough to forget it sometimes." Madison had wandered the perimeter of the garden while they spoke, camera in hand. Not her phone, her grandfather's old Canon, the one she'd had restored for her senior project. She raised it just as Talia laughed, and Elaine tucked a strand of silver hair behind her ear. The shutter clicked. Once. She didn't need another. Weeks later, the photo hung in a small frame on Madison's desk. Two women, decades apart, but leaning toward each other like branches that had grown toward the same sun. Neither posed, neither aware. Just a moment of transmission, of legacy, of quiet recognition. When Madison's college roommate asked who the girl in the picture was, she replied, "That's not the point." Back in Tybee, Talia stood alone by the garden gate after Elaine had gone. She looked out toward the path, still holding the letter. The edges had curled a bit in her hand. The ink shimmered faintly in the afternoon sun. She thought of everything that could have gone wrong, of the classes she almost dropped, the meals skipped, the apartment with no heating. She thought of quitting until someone stepped in and rewrote her ending. No press release, no gala, just a grant, just a garden. She folded the letter carefully and whispered to no one, "I'll make it matter." That evening, Elaine lit a candle in the sitting room back at home. Not for ceremony, not for memory, just because the house smelled better with something soft burning near the bookshelf. She placed her book beside it and sat in the quiet. Some storms, she knew, cleared the air without ever announcing their exit. What lingered wasn't damage, but space. Space for something else to grow. Outside, snow still lined the edges of the yard, but something beneath it had already started to thaw. Elaine didn't need to look. She could feel it. The Tybee house had never looked like this before. String lights looped from the porch columns to the old oaks out front, casting a warm, honeyed glow that reached all the way to the driveway. Inside, lanterns flickered against the wood-paneled walls, and long tables bore centerpieces of wild hydrangeas and candle wax still fresh with the smell of matchlight. It was the first Mercer Foundation gala, not a fundraiser, not a spectacle. Just a gathering of what Elaine had always believed in, people who'd stayed when it would have been easier to go. Women who worked, men who listened, students who'd nearly quit. Elaine stood near the French doors in a dark green wrap dress, quiet as ever. No stage, no spotlight. Just a pin on her collar, simple, brass, etched with her initials. E.C. Madison had chosen it, and Madison now stood at the microphone, a single index card in her hand and a tremor in her voice she didn't try to hide. "My grandmother," she began, "has never asked for applause, so tonight isn't about applause. It's about acknowledgement." The room went still, reverent. She gave without demand, just grace. She stood still when it would have been easier to shout, and when the world tried to unwrite her, she rewrote it instead. Elaine's hand touched the edge of her pin, but her eyes never left Madison. "She didn't just build a trust fund," Madison continued. "She built a trust. In people, in possibility, in me." She folded the card and stepped back. No music, no grand finale, just the sound of a room breathing deeper than it had in years. Colette weaved through the crowd with an ease born of purpose, clipboard in hand, earpiece tucked behind one ear. Not for security, just to keep the caterers on time. Every detail hummed like a private thank you to Elaine. The tea selections, the choice of art prints for auction, all women, all independent. The quiet no-phones rule that had made even the youngest guests lift their eyes. When she passed Elaine, she leaned in just enough to whisper, "Everything's on time, even the weather." Elaine squeezed her hand once, then let go. "You made it feel like a celebration." "It is." Across the bridge in Savannah, Valerie sat at her dining room table, drink in hand. tablet open to an Instagram reel she hadn't been invited to witness in person. Someone had broken the no phones rule. Someone always did. She watched as guests clinked glasses and applauded softly at the end of Madison's speech. Her fingers tightened around her wine glass as she spotted familiar faces. Local officials, foundation heads, names she'd once had dinner with. No one had thought to include her. And that was the inclusion. Colin watched the live stream from his laptop, alone on the pull-out sofa in the apartment he'd moved into after Alyssa left. He didn't drink. He didn't text anyone. He didn't pause the video when Elaine appeared on screen, walking the edge of the garden path in her dark green dress, speaking quietly to a young woman in a cobalt hijab and sneakers. She smiled, listening. Elaine touched her arm lightly, nodded once, then moved on. Colin leaned forward, squinting like proximity might explain what distance couldn't. Then the camera panned to the pin on her lapel. EC. The frame froze when the signal lagged. He reached up to touch the screen, but it didn't unstick. The image stayed suspended, Elaine mid-step, face unreadable, as though she already knew he was watching and had decided to keep walking anyway. Back at the Tybee house, Madison slipped away after the last round of thank yous. She found Elaine outside, beneath the old hanging lantern. Did it feel right? Madison asked. Elaine exhaled slowly. It felt like something ended, but more like something else began. Madison held up her phone. They're asking if we'll do it again next year. Elaine looked out toward the marsh, the tide high, moonlight on the water like a promise. We'll see, she said. But if we do... She turned back to Madison, her smile quiet but unmistakable. Let's keep the guest list just as short. The deed was clean, cleaner than most lives ever get. Filed, stamped, notarized, and uploaded to the county record under a single, clear name. Madison Elaine Carter. No clauses, no contingencies. Full rights, full ownership. Effective immediately. The transfer had gone public that morning, folded quietly into the local paper between real estate ads and an article about the upcoming charity fair. No headlines, no interviews, just a line item that meant the Tybee Island property no longer belonged to Elaine Carter, widow, but to Madison Carter, steward. That word had been Elaine's choice. Not owner, not heir. Steward. When Madison pulled up to the island that afternoon, the tide was halfway out. The road damp from salt spray. The house shimmered through the mist like a memory that refused to fade. Elaine was already there, kneeling near the gate with her gardening gloves on. The same canvas kind she'd worn for 30 years. A tray of lavender sat beside her, soil black and rich against the pale roots. Madison stepped out of the car, her voice soft. You should have waited for me. I did, Elaine said without looking up. You're right on time. The gate still bore its old nameplate. Carter House, 1979, but a smaller brass tag gleamed beneath it. Mercer Foundation Coastal Campus. Elaine pressed the next plant into the soil, packing it tight. This place won't just be a house anymore. It's going to host writing retreats, mentorship residencies, something that keeps growing. Even after I don't. Madison crouched beside her, brushing soil from her knees. You're not going anywhere. Elaine smiled faintly. Everyone goes somewhere, sweetheart. The point is, what we leave standing. 2 hours away, Colin slowed his car as he crossed the causeway. The sea stretched wide on either side, the marsh reeds bending in the wind like they were whispering secrets he wasn't invited to hear. He told himself he was just out for a drive, that he wasn't looking for her, that he didn't still remember how the driveway curved, how the mailbox tilted, how the smell of coffee used to drift from the porch. When he saw the new sign, polished, formal, and not his name anywhere on it, he didn't pull in. He just kept driving. Back on the island, the late afternoon light softened to gold. Elaine leaned on the gatepost. Her gloves streaked with dirt. The deed feels different when it's done right, she said. Madison nodded. You're sure about all of it? The residence change, the title transfer, everything being in my name? I've never been sure of anything, Madison exhaled, looking at the house, the wildflowers starting to reclaim the edge of the garden. They'll talk, you know, about what you did, about what you didn't. Elaine gave a quiet laugh. Let them. Talking keeps them from doing. I prefer work that stays put. Madison's voice trembled, just a little. I won't let them write you out. Elaine turned, her eyes steady. That's why I chose you. You understand that legacy isn't about revenge. It's about accuracy. She pulled one last lavender sprig from the tray and handed it to Madison. Go on, she said. Plant this one. Madison knelt, pressed her hands into the earth. The roots gave easily, taking to the soil like they'd been waiting. When she finished, Elaine stood beside her, shoulder to shoulder. For a long moment, neither spoke. The wind moved through the lavender, setting off the faintest hum, almost like applause. Elaine closed her eyes, breathing in. That's the scent I want to linger. Madison glanced toward the horizon, where the light was starting to dim, the first trace of evening purple curling against the sky. You'll always be here, she said quietly. Elaine smiled. That's the plan. Back in town, the notary filed the final confirmation into the online ledger. A green checkmark blinked once, transfer complete. But Harrison Wells had also uploaded something else to the record, per Elaine's written instruction. A single-page addendum, sealed until notice. Its title read, Phase 4, Contingency. The envelope arrived on a Wednesday, tucked among grocery flyers and a bank statement. Plain white, no return address, but Elaine recognized the handwriting instantly. Sharp, slanted, impatient. Colin. She held it over the counter for a long moment, then set it beside the kettle and poured the boiling water anyway. The whistle faded into the hush of the house. When the tea was ready, she opened the envelope. The paper was creased in a way that said he'd rewritten it more than once. His words were careful at first, almost formal, then looser. A paragraph about regret, another about misunderstandings. Then the real sentence, the one he'd meant the whole time. You were right about her, but you were wrong about me. Elaine read it once, no tears, no reply. She folded the letter and placed it in the top drawer of her desk, under the will, under the trust deeds, beneath the things that already spoke for her. Then she closed the drawer and pressed her palm flat against the wood. That'll do, she murmured. When Madison came home that afternoon, the porch fan was already turning, slow and steady. 2 glasses of sweet tea waited on the table, condensation slipping down the sides like quiet punctuation. Madison sat down beside her. He wrote again. Elaine nodded. Do you feel better? Elaine took a long sip, watching the fan blades cut the light into gentle stripes. I feel finished. Madison leaned back in her chair, eyes following the motion of the fan. Finished is good, Elaine smiled. Finished is freedom in disguise. They sat there, saying nothing for a while, the air heavy with garden scent and the sound of bees moving through the lavender beds they'd planted weeks earlier. Somewhere down the road, wind chimes clinked like distant laughter. Inside, the old answering machine light blinked once. Madison reached over, pressed play. A voice came through, bright, young, familiar. Hi, Miss Carter, it's Talia. I know you said not to fuss, but I wanted to tell you something. The first check cleared. The classes are covered. And, well, I started a little thing of my own. A grant. Small, but it's mine. I'm calling it the Harbor Fund, for students who almost quit like I did. A pause, then softer. You said legacy was about accuracy. I think I finally know what you meant. The line went quiet, except for the faint rush of ocean behind her words. Elaine closed her eyes. Madison glanced at her. She's starting her own fund? Elaine nodded. Looks that way. Madison grinned. That makes you, what, a matriarch of mentors. Elaine laughed quietly. Don't promote me yet. Let her build something first. Then we'll see what the title fits. As twilight settled, they moved from the porch to the garden path. The lavender swayed lightly, purple against the gold of dusk. Madison snapped one sprig and tucked it behind Elaine's ear. You should keep this, she said. I already do. From the mailbox at the end of the drive, another envelope waited, new, unbent, stamped with a seal from the county clerk's office. Harrison's seal. Madison bent to pick it up. From Harrison, you want to open it? Elaine shook her head. Not tonight. I already finished one story today. They went back inside as the porch light blinked on automatically. The unopened envelope lay on the railing, catching the last bit of sun. Across the back, in Harrison's careful handwriting, a single line stood out. Phase 4, execution date confirmed. The morning broke slow and salt-stung. Elaine slipped out before breakfast, before the paperboy made his loop, before the Tybee breeze turned sharp with noon heat. She wore her canvas shoes and a windbreaker the color of wet slate. Her hair was pulled back, practical and neat. No one asked where she was going. Madison knew not to. The beach trail curved past a row of dunes and opened to the edge of the island where the marsh kissed the sea. She walked it steady, not with purpose, but with presence. Her stride was measured, like she had nowhere to be, but every right to be there. Midway down the trail, she reached the bench, the same one she used to avoid. Today, she sat. A bird, small, gray, familiar, landed beside her on the wood slat. It cocked its head but didn't flinch. Elaine smiled, eyes soft. Even you waited for this. The bird hopped once, twice, then stilled. Together, they watched the tide come in. On her walk back, she passed the old wedding chapel, paint peeling a little now, ivy reclaiming the stone. The bell tower stood quiet, the rope long since retired. Elaine paused across the street. No car in the lot, no music, no rehearsals. A woman in an apron stepped outside the florist's shop next door, snapping the head off a stubborn tulip. When she saw Elaine, her face lit. "Morning, Miss Carter," Elaine nodded. "Garden's looking good." "We're keeping it alive," the florist tilted her head, playful. "The new interns keep asking about you." Elaine raised a brow. "What do you tell them?" "That you're a myth with a checkbook." Elaine smiled. "Close enough," she continued on. That afternoon, back at the Tybee house, Colette met Madison under the arbor with a small brass plaque wrapped in velvet. They installed it themselves at the garden's edge, where the jasmine met the lavender, right by the bench where Madison had taken that photo of Elaine and Talia. The plaque read, "In honor of E.M., she withdrew, and everything changed." Madison brushed her hand over it. "I wish I could have added more." Elaine, standing behind her, shook her head. "It says enough." That night, the house was quiet but not empty, the kind of stillness that felt chosen. Elaine hummed softly as she folded linens, an old tune half-remembered from her childhood, something her mother used to hum during storms, not loud, just enough to claim the silence before the world could. She tucked the last folded napkin into its drawer and turned off the kitchen light. The phone didn't ring, the door didn't knock. She had made her peace loud enough to echo without echoing again. Later, she sat with Madison on the porch, each with a mug of tea. "You ever regret it?" Madison asked quietly. Elaine took a slow sip. "Regret is for the parts you wish you could rewrite. I didn't write this in ink. I carved it." Madison didn't reply. She didn't have to. They watched the stars come out one by one, like the universe exhaling. Somewhere, Colin would be in his apartment, alone, wondering why forgiveness didn't come with proof of delivery. Valerie still pretending she didn't check public records every week. Alyssa, gone, forgotten. Elaine didn't need the updates. She had lavender, and roots, and peace. The next morning she opened her journal, the one she hadn't touched since the wedding that never was, and wrote one final line. "At my son's wedding rehearsal," his fiancée said, "she never knows when to stay home." And my son joined in. They found out soon enough when I stayed home, and took my money with me. She smiled as she capped the pen, and finally closed the book.